The day I walked into the bank, I expected to close an old savings account and go home before lunch. Instead, my entire life changed. My name is Lauren Hayes. I'm 54 years old, and until that Tuesday, I believed I had lived a simple, honest life in Naples, Florida. My husband, Ethan Hayes, had passed away 14 months earlier after a sudden heart attack. We had been married for 27 years. He worked as a commercial real estate consultant, and I never questioned his business. Why would I? We owned a modest house, drove ordinary cars, and never lived like wealthy people. That morning, I visited Gulf Coast Community Bank to close the joint savings account Ethan and I had once used for vacations. I was certain it still contained only a few $100s. The young teller smiled politely while typing the account number. A second later, her smile disappeared. She looked at the monitor, then back at me. "Mrs. Hayes, would you mind waiting just a moment?" She disappeared behind a glass door. I assumed it was paperwork. Nothing more. Instead, the branch manager appeared. "Mrs. Hayes," he said calmly, "would you please come to my office?" His tone made my stomach tighten. Inside, he turned his monitor toward me. "Before we close this account," he asked carefully, "are you aware of the current balance?" "About $400, I answered. He slowly shook his head. "No, ma'am." Then he rotated the screen. $26,984,311.47. I stared at the number. $26 million. I couldn't breathe. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. "I'm afraid there isn't." The manager explained that the account had received numerous deposits over the last 3 years. Millions of dollars. Large wire transfers. Several corporate payments. Everything appeared legally processed. The account belonged to both Ethan and me. Legally. I had never seen a single statement showing those numbers. I left the bank in complete silence. Sitting in my car outside, one question echoed in my mind. Who had my husband really been? I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the number on the bank manager's screen. $26 million. By 3 in the morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a notebook, and every financial document I could find. When Ethan died, I had handled his estate myself. The house, retirement account, life insurance, everything had seemed completely ordinary. Nothing suggested hidden wealth. I logged into our online banking portal. The balance was still there. Almost $27 million. With trembling hands, I opened the transaction history. The deposits stretched back nearly 3 years. Some were for $350,000. Others exceeded $1 million. Every payment came from the same company, Atlantic Meridian Holdings. I'd never heard that name before. Not once in 27 years of marriage. There were only 2 outgoing transfers. One for $900,000. Another for $1.3 million. Both had been sent just months before Ethan died. Neither destination meant anything to me. I leaned back in my chair, trying to remember every conversation we'd ever had about work. There had been business trips to Miami. Late-night phone calls. A second cell phone he'd claimed belonged to his office. At the time, I'd accepted every explanation without question. Now those memories felt different. Not because they proved anything, but because they suddenly mattered. The next morning, instead of going to work, I drove to a public library across town. Something told me not to search from my home computer. I typed in the company name. Very little appeared. Atlantic Meridian Holdings was registered in Delaware. No website. No employees. No public records beyond the registration. A shell company. Then I noticed one familiar name. Victor Caldwell. My heart nearly stopped. Victor had been Ethan's closest friend since college. He had even been the best man at our wedding. About 15 years earlier, Ethan told me they had argued over business and never spoke again. I'd believed him. Now Victor's name sat in front of me as the managing partner of the mysterious company sending millions into our account. Either my husband had lied, or he'd been hiding something far bigger than I could imagine. I closed my laptop. There was only one person I trusted to help me now. I needed a lawyer. Not the attorney who handled Ethan's estate. Someone who worked for me. Someone who wasn't connected to my husband's past. By Friday afternoon, I had an appointment with one of the most respected financial litigation attorneys in South Florida. For the first time since leaving the bank, I felt like I was finally taking control. Attorney Monica Alvarez welcomed me into her office overlooking downtown Miami. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything. The bank. The mysterious deposits. Atlantic Meridian Holdings. Victor Caldwell. When I finished, she folded her hands and looked directly at me. "Lauren," she said quietly, "the first thing you need to understand is that legally, this account became yours the moment your husband passed away." I blinked. "You mean, the money belongs to me?" "Legally, yes. But that doesn't mean you're safe." She explained that if the money came from fraud, money laundering, or another financial crime, government agencies, or whoever believed they owned it, could eventually come looking for it. "And until we know where it came from," she continued, "you shouldn't touch a single dollar." Those words chilled me more than the balance itself. Monica recommended hiring a forensic financial investigator. His name was Daniel Brooks, a former IRS special agent who specialized in tracing hidden assets. I agreed immediately. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to return to my normal routine. I went to work, bought groceries, watered the flowers Ethan had planted years ago. But nothing felt normal anymore. Then strange things started happening. A black SUV appeared across the street from my house. It stayed for nearly an hour. The next day, it returned. Different parking spot. Same vehicle. Then came the phone calls. Unknown numbers. Silence whenever I answered. One afternoon, I found an envelope tucked beneath my front door. There was no stamp. No return address. Only a single sheet of paper. Some questions are safer left unanswered. No signature. No explanation. I drove straight to Monica's office. She read the note twice before placing it into a plastic evidence bag. "They know you're investigating," she said calmly. "Who?" "I don't know yet." She immediately instructed me to save every voicemail, photograph every unfamiliar vehicle, and avoid discussing the case with anyone. Even family. Especially family. 3 weeks later, Daniel Brooks called. "I think I've found your husband's secret," he said. His voice sounded unusually serious. "We need to meet in person." The following morning, Monica spread several financial reports across her conference table. Daniel pointed to a web of companies connected by wire transfers. Every path eventually led back to one man, Victor Caldwell. According to Daniel's investigation, Victor had spent years helping luxury real estate developers move millions through consulting companies that barely existed. Atlantic Meridian Holdings wasn't a real business. It was a financial pipeline. And Ethan had been one of the people helping keep it alive. I felt the room begin to spin. The man I'd trusted for nearly 3 decades hadn't simply kept a secret. He had lived an entirely different life. Daniel's report changed everything. Nearly $18 million inside my account could be traced to a network of fake consulting agreements tied to luxury developments across South Florida. The remaining funds appeared to come from Ethan's legitimate business income. But until federal investigators sorted everything out, none of it was truly safe. Monica wasted no time. "We're going to contact the authorities before anyone else does," she said. Voluntarily. At first, the idea terrified me. What if they think I was involved? "They won't," she replied. "Because we're bringing them the truth before they come looking for you." Within days, Monica contacted federal investigators. Every document. Every bank statement. Every wire transfer. Everything was handed over. I finally felt as though someone else was carrying part of the burden. Then my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar Miami number. I answered. "Lauren." The voice was calm. Smooth. Confident. I recognized it instantly. "Victor Caldwell." "I heard you've been asking questions," he said. I remained silent. "I'm only calling because Ethan cared about you." My stomach tightened. "What do you want?" "I want to keep you out of trouble." His tone sounded almost friendly. "Almost. You're holding money that doesn't really belong to you. The bank disagrees." A quiet laugh came through the speaker. The bank doesn't know the whole story. Neither did I. Victor continued. Ethan and I had agreements. Complicated agreements. If you keep talking to lawyers and investigators, people will start asking whether you benefited from those arrangements too. It wasn't advice. It was a warning. I've already hired an attorney, I answered. Then tell your attorney to stop digging. Silence filled the line. Finally, he added. Believe me, some truths are expensive. The call ended. For several seconds, I simply stared at my phone. My hands were shaking. Monica wasn't surprised when I told her. He wouldn't have called unless he was nervous, she said. If he truly controlled the situation, his lawyers would be speaking instead. The next afternoon, another surprise arrived. An email. From Ethan's older sister, Rebecca Hayes. She hadn't contacted me in nearly a year. Now she suddenly wanted to visit. She wrote that she'd been thinking about me, that she wanted us to remember Ethan together, and that she had important information that shouldn't be discussed over the phone. I forwarded the message to Monica. Her reply came less than 5 minutes later. Don't meet her alone. If Victor called you yesterday, Monica explained, there's a very good chance Rebecca is no longer acting on her own. For the first time, I realized this wasn't only about hidden money anymore. Someone was trying to control what I knew, and they were getting closer. Rebecca arrived that Sunday afternoon. She wasn't alone. Victor Caldwell stepped out of a silver Mercedes behind her, carrying an expensive bottle of wine as if they were old friends stopping by for dinner. I opened the door before they could knock. Lauren, Rebecca said warmly, forcing a smile. We were worried about you. I wasn't expecting visitors. Victor smiled. We just want to help. Against my better judgment, I let them into the living room. Monica had prepared me for this. Listen. Say very little. Agree to nothing. For several minutes they spoke about Ethan. His kindness. His generosity. The years we'd shared together. It almost felt genuine. Almost. Then Victor leaned forward. Lauren, the money has become a problem. I've noticed. He nodded. There are people who believe those funds should be returned. I've already turned everything over to my attorney. His smile faded slightly. Lawyers complicate things. Rebecca reached for my hand. Ethan loved you. He would have wanted you protected. Protected. The same word Victor had used during the phone call. It sounded rehearsed. Victor slowly placed a folder on the coffee table. Inside was a single sheet of paper. An offer. If I signed a confidentiality agreement, withdrew my cooperation with investigators, and transferred part of the account to another company, I would receive $5 million. No court. No investigation. No publicity. A clean ending for everyone, Victor said. I looked directly at him. So you're asking me to stay quiet? I'm asking you to be practical. I closed the folder. No. Neither of them moved. Victor's expression hardened. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand enough. For the first time, the friendliness disappeared completely. Ethan understood, he said quietly. He knew when to stop asking questions. The room became silent. What does that mean? Victor hesitated. Only for a second. Then he looked away. Nothing. No, I replied. You said he knew when to stop asking questions. Rebecca quickly interrupted. Lauren, please, you're misunderstanding. But Victor had already made a mistake. A small one. Yet impossible to ignore. Until that moment, I had accepted Ethan's death exactly as everyone described it. A sudden heart attack. Natural, unexpected. Now, Victor had spoken as though Ethan had been afraid of something. As though there had been questions. As though there had been consequences. I stood. Our conversation is over. Victor slowly rose from the couch. As he walked toward the door, he stopped beside me. His voice was barely above a whisper. Some people spend their whole lives believing accidents are just accidents. Then he smiled and walked out. I locked the door behind them. For several minutes, I couldn't move. My heart pounded against my chest. I wasn't thinking about the money anymore. I was thinking about Ethan. For the first time, I wondered if my husband had really died the way everyone believed he had. I called Monica the moment Victor and Rebecca left. She listened carefully as I repeated every word I could remember. When I mentioned Victor's final comment, she became unusually quiet. "You think he meant Ethan's death?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I don't ignore statements like that." The following week, Monica filed a request to obtain the complete medical examiner's report and the original police records from the night Ethan died. "We're not accusing anyone," she explained. "We're simply making sure every fact has been reviewed." At the same time, Daniel Brooks continued tracing financial records. Then came the breakthrough. He called us into Monica's office carrying another thick folder. "This wasn't easy to find," he said. Inside were hundreds of text messages recovered from Ethan's second cell phone. The same phone I'd seen years earlier, the one he insisted belonged to work. Most of the messages were between Ethan and Victor. At first, they discussed business. Property deals. Investors. Wire transfers. Then the conversations became different. More personal. More desperate. One message from Ethan caught my attention immediately. "I don't want my name connected to this anymore." Victor answered only 2 minutes later. "It's too late to walk away." Another exchange was even worse. "Ethan, Lauren can't ever find out." "Victor, she won't. Just keep everything where it is." My chest tightened. For years, my name had been protecting their operation without me ever knowing it. Then Daniel showed us another message. It had been sent only 6 days before Ethan died. "Ethan, I'm meeting with an attorney next week. This has gone too far." No reply appeared for nearly an hour. Finally, Victor wrote, "Think very carefully before you do something you'll regret." The room fell silent. Nobody spoke. Daniel finally broke the silence. "We still have no evidence that Ethan's death was anything other than natural." Monica nodded. "But these messages prove something else." She looked directly at me. "Your husband was trying to leave." I felt tears fill my eyes. For months, I had struggled with 2 versions of Ethan. The loving husband, and the man who had hidden millions of dollars from me. Now a third version emerged. A man who had realized he was trapped. Later that afternoon, Monica received another phone call. Federal investigators had officially opened a criminal case against Victor Caldwell and several executives connected to Atlantic Meridian Holdings. Search warrants had already been approved. Bank accounts were being frozen. Luxury properties across Florida were under investigation. For the first time, Victor wasn't the one asking questions anymore. He was the one being questioned. The subpoena arrived on a Monday morning. A plain white envelope. Inside was a formal request from federal prosecutors asking me to testify as a witness in the investigation against Victor Caldwell. For several minutes, I simply stared at the papers. I had never been inside a federal courtroom. Now I was about to become one of the government's key witnesses. Monica wasn't surprised. "This was always coming," she said. "They don't just want the financial records anymore. They want your story." Over the next several weeks, we prepared for every possible question. How Ethan behaved during his final years. The second cell phone. The hidden account. Victor's visit. His threats. Every conversation had to be remembered as accurately as possible. Then came another major development. Federal agents executed search warrants at several offices connected to Atlantic Meridian Holdings. Computers. Financial servers. Storage units. Luxury homes. Everything was seized. Daniel called later that evening. They found exactly what we hoped. Internal accounting files. Hidden ledgers. Private emails. And one spreadsheet that changed the entire investigation. It listed dozens of accounts used to temporarily hold money before it was distributed. Each account had a code name. Except one. Mine. Instead of a code, it simply read, "Lauren Hayes, personal joint account." I stared at the page. They hadn't hidden behind my identity. They had used it openly. Daniel explained what investigators now believed. Whenever large transfers needed to appear legitimate, Victor routed the money through joint household accounts belonging to trusted associates. Because husbands and wives regularly moved money between shared accounts, banks rarely questioned the transactions. Without ever knowing it, My name had become one of the safest hiding places in their entire operation. I felt sick. Monica placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. The evidence also proves something important. What? You never accessed those funds. You never moved them. You never benefited from them. The records show exactly that. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a small sense of relief. The truth wasn't just something I remembered anymore. It was documented. Verified. Impossible to deny. A few days later, prosecutors informed Monica that Victor had refused to cooperate. He insisted every transaction had been legal. He blamed Ethan for everything. Claimed my husband had designed the entire operation. When Monica told me, I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was desperate. Victor knew the evidence was closing in. And desperate people often made desperate mistakes. I had no idea just how big his next mistake would be. Victor Caldwell's deposition took place 3 months later inside the federal courthouse in Miami. I wasn't allowed inside the room. Instead, I waited with Monica at a small cafe across the street, trying to drink a cup of coffee that had gone cold long ago. Around noon, Monica's phone rang. She answered without saying a word. After listening for nearly a minute, she smiled. A real smile. When she ended the call, she looked at me. He's falling apart. According to prosecutors, Victor had entered the interview with complete confidence. He denied every accusation. He claimed Atlantic Meridian Holdings was a legitimate consulting company. He insisted every dollar had been earned legally. For nearly 2 hours, his story never changed. Then prosecutors began placing documents on the table. Wire transfers, internal emails, financial ledgers. The text messages recovered from Ethan's second phone. One by one, Victor tried explaining them away. They're being taken out of context. Those weren't my decisions. I don't remember that conversation. Then prosecutors showed him a message he'd written just days before one of the largest transfers. Move everything through Lauren's account. It'll look like family savings. For the first time, Victor stopped talking. The room remained silent. Then another surprise arrived. One of Victor's former business partners had agreed to cooperate with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. His name was Daniel Mercer. For years, he had managed the financial records behind Atlantic Meridian Holdings. Now he was telling investigators everything. According to Mercer, Victor personally designed the entire laundering system. Every shell company. Every fake consulting contract. Every hidden account. Including mine. Mercer also confirmed something I had secretly feared. Ethan had tried to leave. Several months before his death, he'd told Victor he wanted out. He planned to meet an attorney. He wanted to report everything. Victor had refused. He told Ethan, Mercer testified, nobody walks away from this. The words sent chills through everyone in the room. There was still no evidence linking Victor to Ethan's heart attack. But investigators now understood something they hadn't known before. Ethan hadn't died as Victor's loyal partner. He had died trying to escape him. By the end of the deposition, Victor had contradicted himself repeatedly. Several answers directly conflicted with bank records. Others contradicted his own emails. Finally, on the advice of his attorneys, he refused to answer any further questions. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around the entrance. Television cameras waited for Victor to leave. For the first time in years, he wasn't the powerful businessman controlling the story. He was the man trying desperately to survive it. And everyone could see it. 2 weeks later, I sat inside a federal conference room overlooking Biscayne Bay. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I wasn't there as a frightened widow. I was there as a witness. Across the table sat federal prosecutors, IRS investigators, and my attorney, Monica Alvarez. They asked me to describe everything. The day at the bank. The mysterious account. Victor's threats. Rebecca's visit. The hidden phone. Every answer I gave matched the financial records investigators had already collected. When the interview ended, the lead prosecutor closed his notebook and looked at me. Mrs. Hayes, he said, the evidence confirms that you had no knowledge of this operation. Those words lifted a weight I had carried for months. A week later, Monica called with another update. The government has finished tracing the money. I drove to her office immediately. She placed several documents in front of me. Nearly $11 million have been identified as criminal proceeds. Those funds would be seized by the federal government and later used for restitution and financial penalties against the people involved in the scheme. I nodded quietly. I expected that. But Monica continued, smiling for the first time in weeks. The remaining balance has been verified as legitimate income, investment growth, and funds that cannot legally be connected to criminal activity. I looked at her without speaking. Lauren. She slid the final court order across the table. The court has ruled that those funds legally belong to you. I lowered my eyes to the document. $15,842,906.18. I never imagined seeing a number like that attached to my name. Yet I felt no excitement. Only relief. The money no longer felt like a prize. It felt like responsibility. Several days later, Victor Caldwell officially accepted a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges, including wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and tax offenses. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to pursue several additional counts. He also agreed to surrender millions of dollars in assets. Luxury homes, investment properties, bank accounts, even the yacht he had proudly shown Ethan years earlier. Rebecca wasn't charged with any crimes. However, investigators proved she had accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars that originated from the laundering scheme. A federal judge ordered her to return every dollar she had received. When Monica finished explaining everything, she smiled gently. It's over. I leaned back in my chair. For nearly a year, my life had been controlled by fear. Now, for the first time, I could finally breathe again. 6 months after the case officially ended, I stood on the balcony of my new home overlooking the Gulf of Mexico. The view was peaceful. The air smelled of salt and sunshine. For the first time in a very long while, I wasn't waiting for another phone call, or another threat, or another secret. I had sold the house Ethan and I once shared. Too many memories lived inside those walls. Some beautiful, some painful. I wanted a place that belonged only to me. With Monica's help, I created a family trust and hired an independent financial advisor. Most of the money stayed invested. Quietly. Safely. I had learned that wealth wasn't something to show off. It was something to protect. One of the first things I did was establish a scholarship fund for students pursuing careers in nursing and emergency medicine. The hospital where I'd worked for over 20 years had given me purpose. Now I wanted to give something back. I also helped renovate a community clinic serving families across Southwest Florida. Watching patients receive care in a building I'd helped restore brought me more happiness than any luxury purchase ever could. A month later, my son Ryan flew in from Jacksonville. We spent an entire weekend talking. Not just about the investigation. About life. About mistakes. About forgiveness. He admitted he had struggled to accept the truth about his father. So have I told him. I still love the man I believed he was. Ryan nodded slowly. But now you know who he really was. I looked toward the ocean. I know both versions. And somehow, I have to live with both. We hugged before he left. It felt like the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. Sometimes people ask whether I regret discovering the truth. The answer surprises them. No, because the truth didn't destroy my life. The lies did. The truth simply gave me the chance to rebuild it. Victor Caldwell is now serving his federal prison sentence. I rarely think about him anymore. Rebecca wrote me one letter. I never answered. Not out of anger. Simply because some chapters don't need another conversation. Today, my mornings begin with coffee on the balcony instead of fear. My evenings end with gratitude instead of questions. If there's one lesson this journey taught me, it's this. The people closest to us can keep unimaginable secrets. But no secret stays hidden forever. Eventually, the truth finds its way into the light. And when it does, you have a choice. You can let it destroy you. Or you can let it set you free. I know which one I chose. And for the first time in years, I finally feel free.